So what do you teach?
English.
You teach Taiwanese students
Um,
English?
I was teaching Taiwanese.
Oh, so were you in Taiwan?
Not when I was teaching online.
Uh-huh.
But I have been to Taiwan.
Yeah.
I love it. That's my end goal. That's the goal is Taiwan.
Oh,
'Cause
okay,
it's-
really?
It's everything.
Feel
I
free to
wanted
dive
when
into
I
some
first
food.
moved to Vietnam back in
Breakfast this morning is perfect.
2007.
Oh, amazing. That's, it's like some kind of brunch type of style.
Yeah, I had a lesson
I
this
I
morning.
lived in
online,
Saigon
and then I had a coffee
for 4
straight
years, and I was
after.
back in the States for
I had
2.
my coffee this
And then
morning.
I went
Mhm.
out to Taiwan for a holiday.
If you have an
to visit all
impulse,
my
go ahead.
students, toured around the
Something
country, totally
I'd
fell in
like
love
to
with it.
mention
Like,
actually
oh my
is
god,
the
this is
routine that I do.
You've
It's
been
been
to
really
Taiwan.
effective. I learned it for a couple of months.
Imagine
It's
it's
been really good.
you'll understand
Oh,
this being
to not eat for your morning
it's all
routine?
of the Chinese stuff.
To kind of like
Chinese,
earn it, just
all of
like
the-
kind of like fundamentality is what I like to call it. So
Yeah.
it's like getting
And-
tasks done,
and
and
it's
then
all the Japanese stuff.
once you've done your tasks, then you
You
can
know,
have
the
like
Japanese
food
are
as like
also
a reward
like
and occasion.
you know.
Effective way to really earn.
It's a good way of
Yeah.
thinking
Well,
about it. And then you're savouring it.
that's a Catby's word, isn't it? Yeah, because I said it to my
Well,
friends.
guys,
They were like,
let's get started today. I guess this is going to be our crowd. This is our crew today. A little hot? I
No,
turned the AC.
I'm always,
Okay. It's getting warm again.
It is.
It's supposed to be raining and like 20 degrees.
It's not jinx.
It's perfect today.
It should be about 68 and raining. Jeez.
Look at this. We got 2 iPads. I love it. Amazing. Well, thanks so much for coming back this week, doing urges and impulses. For Kane and Julie, we kind of had a skim of this when we talked about pain and pleasure and how these are the biggest 2 behaviors that humans are driven by. Either the need to avoid pain or the desire to gain pleasure. And this has a big impact when we're looking at urges and impulses. So today, I want to also just kind of have a little experiment within you, because it's really important as we talk about this topic to create some sort of awareness, right? So if you have awarenesses to take a snack, maybe you already ate this morning, right? Where is that showing up? Like, what's the urge there, right? So we're gonna be diving into this, but also say with your phone, say you wanna pick up your phone today during this session. Be mindful of like, what is the desire there? What is the reason? But just the idea is to just notice it when that urge comes up. And we'll talk about how this kind of goes around, but this is something to be mindful while we have this practice today. Any type of urges that you have, and then you'll be able to understand it a little bit more as we talk about these inside of the discussion today. So one thing I just wanted to start off with, kind of just bring through, to just kind of open up discussion. If we could share a good or bad impulse that we have. It doesn't have to be too horrible. Like, I mean, there's some that can be really private. Because for me, like my biggest one in my past was porn addiction, and this was really, really tough for me. So you don't have to share that deep if you don't want to, but the idea is to just to kind of see what we're all kind of getting impulsed by, and see, because we'll talk about this in a moment, but we're all facing urges and impulses at a different level. And the world nowadays, they've got such great weapons, great technology, great tools to make it harder for us to not indulge, to not give in to our urges. And I mean, do you guys, when you have an urge and impulse, do you give into it? What's the reaction that you have? Or what's the response?
My big one is my phone. Is, I hear a ding or whatever sound I have, like all my friends on Facebook, I've given everybody a different ringtone, so I know who it is without having to look.
Wow.
For that very reason, because it's like, oh, it's X person, I don't need to, like, they can wait, or it's like, oh, this person, I need to talk to them.
Uh-huh.
But like when it's just my regular generic tone, it's like, is it work? Because I've been trying to find work. Is it dating? Is it some guy I'm trying to meet? You know, is it a friend that I need to talk to? So there's always that, which is why I usually completely, bless you, I just
Bless you.
totally turn my phone off because, and I realized you don't have to answer right then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the person isn't
Exactly.
expecting you to like jump on it.
Exactly.
And so then I make myself too available to people, which is, we talked about that too.
Yeah. I've been in that situation before as well, especially in the middle of work. All of a sudden you're wanting to just focus in on one thing, and then all these different people come and talk to you and such like that and want to say something or even text you. Many distractions, right? The urges and impulses that can arise.
And like you want to engage,
Yeah,
of course, but then you're like, no, I have to do my work, you
Mhm.
know.
That's another discussion, right? Of like how to talk to people about that. But today is just understanding, because I feel like we all know what urges and impulses are. It's like I don't believe I need to explain that much. One distinction that we're going to make though is the difference between like urges and impulses with instinct and intuition, because those can all be interplayed. But for now, I mean, do you guys feel resistance when you have, like, do you want to resist sometimes your urges? When you have urges and impulses, is it easy for you to resist?
Sometimes.
Or do you want to resist?
I was gonna say, like, I actually would like for you to kind of define what you mean, because
Okay.
I think of impulses as like a really positive thing, but
Yeah.
I feel like the vibe is maybe not that way, because like, or like some of the examples, because like I actually think about impulses a lot, and I like to think about like cats when I think of it. Like I want to do things like as soon as the impulse like arrives. Like to talk to someone or like complete a task, or like, oh, I want to go over there, and like,
Yeah.
because like if you watch like cats, like they're asleep and then they're up and then they're like biting you and then they're purring, like it's like they're really in tune with like the impulse and like to follow like the feeling, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
I love that.
so I am curious, like just group definition of like, and is there a difference between urges and impulses, or are they synonymous?
Yeah, there is a slight difference when it comes to it, right? So the impulse is definitely what you're talking about with the cats. It's a great, hey, OJ. Yeah, so impulses, great example for the cats. That's exactly what you would call an impulse. The urge is like a pull as well. But that you know, it's when we look at these types of like urges and impulses, it typically comes from a pull. It's a feeling. It's not always necessarily a thought.
Right.
Did you notice that? Yeah.
I would say like since we're playing semantics with urge and impulse, I'd say impulse is that thing like right in the moment.
Right.
I gotta do it. And an urge to me is like you were saying, more of a stronger pull. Like I have to do this.
I feel like
Right.
urge is like pre-impulse or something.
Yeah, exactly. An urge is more this thing that you're really feeling, and maybe you don't do it right that moment. To me, and an impulse is just in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've given a negative connotation to being impulsive, right? We
Yes.
consider that a bad thing.
Yes.
Oh well, you can't make up you're impulsive. You don't think before you act.
Mm.
But sometimes it's good to be impulsive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you're just like we were talking about coping mechanisms, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Sometimes that thought comes, oh, I need to do this right now, and it's a good thing. Like after this class, like I'm gonna go to the beach, even though I have work to do, which I'm not gonna do. I'm
Yeah,
gonna go
like
work.
all of a sudden it could be an impulse to go to the beach, and that's like a feeling
It's a
that
good impulse.
yeah.
I get it when it comes to certain foods, really. I just kind of just get the feelings right. Like yesterday, for example, I had a pizza for dinner. I was just like, today I just really feel like having the urge just to have a pizza.
Mhm.
It's a Saturday night, like, it's sort of like, let's just kind of just celebrate the near end of a week. I
Yeah.
think so that's where I kind of just get an urge
That's
to
cool.
really have some certain foods.
Yeah, like kind of, it's almost like a reward. That's something that's really mindful, because you're looking at this impulse as something that you can give yourself as a reward. And that can also be very beneficial when you're doing a lot of work or things that are difficult, because then that can get, like, if you can just think about whenever you have an impulse, like sometimes when I go out to eat and have like a dessert, those kinds of situations, it's like, yes, it's an impulse there, but I can justify it with the fact of how much work I've done and how much things that I've done to deserve that. It's like a reward, because when we do have this impulse or urge, what is it? It's basically just a feeling that needs to be resolved, that needs to be solved. That just comes up, that's a pull, but it wants to be solved and figured out in some sort of way.
Exactly. What we call it is earning your cheats. So
The cheats.
earning your cheats. So like earning a dessert, for example. So if you like eat well for the whole week, you're feeling maybe one day a week I'm not going to focus on perhaps a diet I'm sticking to, and I can have a slice of fudge cake, for example. I can have that. I can have that other meal. It's kind of just like earning it. I just feel like you gain a lot of satisfaction when you do it.
Yeah, so Julie, does that kind of clear up anything? Do you want me to identify anything else about urges and impulses so we can all also get a good understanding while we dive into this conversation?
No, I feel like we're on the same page.
Okay, cool. Because that is definitely an important factor as well when we need to define what it means. Where we can start to look at these as also really good things, because I would say impulse could be curiosity, right? All of a sudden you just really get curious about someone, something, and it's not like you just wanted that to happen. It's just sometimes it just shows up. And these are really good, but also they can be really dangerous if we are not mindful of where they're bringing us, especially if it's overindulgence, right? So that's like a case where if you have, smoking, if you're like me, I was addiction to porn, scrolling sometimes, smoking weed, nicotine, and there's a lot of different bad versions of these that could be bad habits, you can necessarily call them, but at the same time, before it's even a habit, it's an impulse. It shows up as an impulse. It could also be an urge, because sometimes like you can put these in the same context and to really define in specific moments, like, okay, I want to all of a sudden smoke. The urge would be more of like conditioned, I would say, and then the impulse is like in the moment. Do you understand that I'm talking about that? Conditioned as in like it's been kind of repetitive. It's like almost become a habit. And it's like, oh, because you know what the flavor or the taste of a sweet dessert is going to taste like. You know the flavors that you want to receive. You want that pleasure. And so whenever that urge, that pull for some sweet, some smoke, some release or some pleasure, that can be defined as an urge through the past experience, but the impulse could be just like in the moments, hey, like I want to all of a sudden just do this, like I want to go to the beach. There's no real past experience, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. So, do we want to share any of our good or bad urges or impulses? Just to go around the room and see what kind of urges and impulses that we have. We're all humans, we all have them. It might be a little bit of a private thing, but this is a safe space. Like, if I'm willing to share about things that have gone on in my life, I would hope that you would respect that as well and keep it, just in this space. And so, likewise for all of you who want to share as well. It could be also in the past. Maybe you had one in the past that you've had, that you've gotten over.
For me, it's drinking in pubs, things,
pubs.
and then that kind of leads to smoking, and then that can sometimes lead to more. So it's kind of like all of it together. But kind of drinking is the catalyst that starts down that path.
Yeah, that's great. And it could also be a good one as well. In some cases, like do you have a good impulse or a good urge?
I guess there's kind of urges to learn and to think when you're kind of in a good state. I think that's probably what I would call a good impulse and
Exactly.
good urge to kind of expand knowledge.
Yeah. That's it's a big one right there. Just the learning factor is What would you say that's a urge or impulse for you?
It's probably an urge, and then you kind of create the actions to kind of make it an impulse and turn it into
And
reality.
to kind of go back on that, it's
Yeah.
like the urge is again that past experience. Like you've
Yeah.
first learned something super unique and fantastic, and it's like all of a sudden you witnessed that feeling from that past. And so because of the witnessing of the feeling, it gave you some sort of pleasure after learning it and maybe applying it later on into your life.
Yeah.
And so that application of that gives you the satisfaction of the completion, the feeling of being completed. And that is what urges and impulses are there for. Like they want us to be completed in some way.
I also think with the act of having urges or impulses, I think it kind of fits into the category of doing things, so the things that you think are good and bad for yourself. So I think if you have experiences in the past, I think it's an opportunity to learn from them, and it's all about the mindset when it comes to that. So if you think, for example, an urge which I used to have a lot was scrolling on social media,
Yeah.
and I think it was sometime last year, I took 30 days completely off it and completely changed everything, and now I don't do it as much, even though I do sometimes get the urge to go on my phone, particularly in the afternoon as well, because I feel like I've had quite a tiring morning and not really got the same energy levels or the same drive and motivation, which I'm trying to work on as I am right now. Obviously I'm not going to be perfect in some of those ways, but I think maybe just I'm trying to set myself maybe a timer or something, like a 10 minute break timer, set myself for that, and then back on with my day and what I'm supposed to be doing. That's one of my urges from the past, which I'm still trying to work on to this day.
Yeah, one thing that is really amazing is like when we were looking at these types of experiences, especially in the day-to-day with like something like scrolling, those things can be quite for some purpose. Like what I'm trying to look for me is what is the nature, what is the deep root for why I would want to do something like that. Why I would, so for example, if I do want to scroll on social media, is it because of boredom or is it because of connection? I want to feel like I'm getting connected. I want to feel like I'm connecting with someone. So there's, again, when we also look at the thing that I brought up in the beginning of what humans are driven by, pain and pleasure, we're most often driven by the need to avoid pain. However, that means that when we're looking at urges and impulses, most of the time, they're actually a desire to gain pleasure. Most of the time, of course, there are some that are needs to avoid pain as well. However, I would say majority of the time, it's only purposely for pleasure. Do you agree with this?
Instant gratification.
Yes, instant gratification.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Because you're pushing the future pain out of your mind.
Right.
Yeah, whatever happens tomorrow, just focus on today.
And so that is really interesting to find out. Okay, so inside of this deep root, inside of this nature, one important factor is like the two distinctions that you can make when you're becoming more aware of this urge or impulse is it a pleasure or is it a pain that is showing up? So is this urge or impulse there because I want to gain pleasure or because I want to remove pain? And then you can start to dive into these aspects of, is it pleasure or pain? And then look at, okay, let's go back to the scrolling example. Say for the instance of where I am, whatever I've gone through the day, the pleasure side of things could be the need to be appreciated and feel connected, right? The pain side of things could be the need to remove boredom. You see what I mean? So these are the nature or the deeper meanings behind the actual urges and impulses that are under these two pillars of pain and pleasure. And so that's where we can understand more about them and get a better reasoning for why they're even showing up. Because again, when we're looking at this, a pull. It's a feeling that we want to complete. So when we complete it, do we have to complete it in the way that the urge tells us to? Do we have to complete it by scrolling? Do we have to complete it by eating the cake? Do we have to complete it by smoking the joint? Not necessarily. There are ways to resolve it in a different way. And this literally is what we can call the habit loop. Anyone familiar with the habit loop?
I haven't heard of it, but I can assume what it's going to be about.
Okay, I'll draw it on the board just to kind of give you, and we'll actually do the little activity for this later. So there's 3 parts to it. Okay, so there's the cue, the routine, and the reward. This is for any sort of habit that you have in your life.
Does that say cue?
Cue, trigger, basically, another word for it. And so when we look at a cue, does anyone, off the top of their head, what could be a cue or trigger?
Something you see.
Something you see. Yeah.
It can be outside or it can be inside, like a film.
Yes.
So it can be something
5 p.m. heading the end of the day.
5 p.m. Yeah, could be a time. Could exactly be a time. It also could be when you're on social media and you see a piece of cake.
I always have this cue like when I'm working and I'm like uploading something or like documents like loading, and I just have like realistically probably a 30-second to 1 minute pause, and then like boom, like go to my phone.
Uh-huh.
Like but any like lull in my actual work,
Yeah.
then I'll be like, oh, like it's this like cue to I don't know, something
Yeah.
else is like alive that I
Mhm.
can like is moving, but it's like truly 30 seconds. I could just wait. But
Just wait, but
I could just wait. But instead, I could then be like 5 minutes later getting really, oh yeah, don't put it.
Especially when you're in a creative act
Mm-hmm.
of doing some, maybe say writing or trying to create something, and then all of a sudden there's a pause and you're not having any flow of that download anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it's like you know like the dot in your head. What do I do now? Oh, is there no flow? So okay, the easiest thing to do is just to
Find something else
Yeah.
to be delighted by. But I think like, I don't know, almost don't even feel like it's an impulse. I think it's something far like more nefarious. Like, I don't know, impulses to me still have this like sense of something to do, but like the cue to the like routine it's like it's way deeper, like in terms of like programming.
mm-hmm.
You know, like I don't think like, oh, I would like to grab my phone. Like I just grab it. You know, like there's no thoughts before.
Yeah. This is because once feelings have become subconsciously inducted, then that is become programming, like you were talking about. And when that all of a sudden becomes a situation, it's just automatic.
Right.
And it's not even an urge or impulse anymore.
Right.
It just becomes almost intuition. And for some
Systematic or
reason,
something.
yeah, it like because it shouldn't necessarily even be impulse or intuition or urge, but it's just it literally becomes autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like
That's a better way to
the
say it.
worst case scenario for some sort of situations, especially if it's like porn or smoking or scrolling, because I feel like I'm almost in that state sometimes where maybe I've been conditioning myself and programming myself into scrolling. And it's like something that I've been working on for years to try to get around. If you were to look at my phone, I've desensitized it so much, and it still is not even solved yet. And I get apps to try to do it. And so there's so many times it's like, okay, why am I even getting on there? And it's the cue. But this is where dopamine gets in the way as well. So when we look at dopamine, it's not just for the fact of wanting to, like if you think about something, even just the act of engaging with that, and there's some sort of pleasure there, dopamine will be released, even if you think it. And then also as soon as you finish that, or do it, then there's also dopamine released.
Mhm.
And so that, as soon as you get that dopamine, of course, that's where the brain wiring starts to become automatic and becoming the urge. And once it comes to urge a few times and gets really
Hundreds of
ingrained,
times.
yes, hundreds of times, it then gets basically wired down into what we can call the path of least resistance, or otherwise autopilot.
Mhm.
So I'll explain this to you, right? So cues, that's the boredom, that's the time of the day, that's a certain feeling, that's a certain thing that you see. There's hundreds of cues, something that someone says. There's typically sensatory and then also thought. Then there's the routine. So that's the actual thing that you're engaging in. And then the reward, that's the pleasure that you get, or the removal of pain that you get. And so the idea here, the way to actually change these impulses and these urges is to just change this part. Because you're never going to change the cue. The cue is always going to be the same. It's always going to show up. It's very difficult to change the cue. And then what the secret is to the habit loop is finding a reward or finding a routine that gives you the same reward as the one you had before. Yes.
I got one. You asked like about eating a banana after you, or eating some fruit after you've eaten. So I got in the habit of, particularly living in Czech Republic, was like lunch, soup, main, dessert, even for lunch.
Uh-huh.
And like in the States, I grew up with dessert was really only after dinner.
Mhm.
So I got into that loop.
Uh-huh.
So today, right, I had banh mi for breakfast. I needed something sweet. It doesn't matter what it is. So, I can have a banana
Mhm.
instead of a coconut coffee, right? Because that's got a lot of calories in it. It's delicious. But my banana, I get the same reward. I got sweet, but I did something healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really superficial. That's a really, really.
But it's a great example as well. You're
It's
changing the
super-
routine with the same cue and
Same
giving
cue.
yourself a similar but
Same reward. I just needed something sweet. It didn't matter. It could have been
Yeah.
a piece of gum, well, something more substantial.
and also, so the thing with paying attention to the rewards, so when we look at so this graph is going to resemble dopamine, okay? I don't know if you've been familiar with this, right? So when we look at, so this is homeostasis. This is our baseline of where we're basically normal, nor like little amounts of dopamine. So with something like porn, huge spike up, huge spike down. Something with cocaine, huge spike up, huge spike down. When we look at something like ice bath, huge spike up, gradual slide down. Over the this is time, by the way, and then this is just the level of dopamine. And something like where I'm talking about this here with the reward, this reward needs to be a little bit similar to the amount of dopamine that you get. If it's too low, it's not going to do it enough for you. And then it will be easier to go back to the other thing.
Mhm.
So it should be similar to where you had it before with the previous routine. And then it won't spike down as much because also if it's a good dopamine, if it's a good act, if it's a good habit, then it doesn't necessarily go far below. But with something like scrolling, it does go below. However, something like engaging in like a sweet banana, it just goes sometimes a little bit below. It doesn't go like, because there's not a lot of dopamine gone. It's like you don't have a craving for, or you don't feel upset after you eat a banana, unless you eat a lot of bananas. Or it's like you've been conditioned so many times to eat a lot of sweets, and you eat a banana and you're not satisfied enough with that, right?
Yeah, for me, it's just something sweet, right? So the banana is just as good as a piece of chocolate for me.
Yeah.
So I need something sweet in my mouth. That's all.
Mm-hmm. So I want to try to do an activity here. Let's see if we can think about a habit in our life, a urge, impulse, whatever it is, and using this framework to change Like, I want you to write down cue, routine, reward 2 times. And then basically you're gonna have the cue and cue the same, right? Or you can have the other cues that you might also be engaging in with this certain routine. And then we're going to change the routine for slide 1 and then slide 2. Gonna change it, but also making sure that when we look at the reward, it's nearly similar through the actual routine. Just giving us a different routine, but it's the same reward. It gives us the same pleasure, it gives us the same reward.
So the same cue, 2 kind of potential outcomes.
Mm-hmm. What is it that I could help with?
I don't have a particular urge or impulse
Uh-huh.
that I struggle with.
Okay. That's good.
Is it is it because my life is so full of them that I don't even notice them?
It could be as well. Like, I mean, I'm not sure what your lifestyle is, and I can't assume anything for what you do in your day-to-day life, right? But sometimes there are scenarios where you may have overdone something and then it becomes kind of habitual, where it doesn't even become recognized as a bad thing anymore. And it's difficult to recognize those at times as well. Maybe I can give you an example.
I got one.
Oh, okay.
Can it be a negative reward? Like, if I've got the cue and I have my routine, the result is something bad.
What are you, like, can you give me an
Okay, yeah,
example?
okay, so I'll go back to the phone, right? Message alert, that's my cue.
Uh-huh.
I check my phone immediately, and the result is I've lost time. So it's like not a reward, like it's something I want to change. Like we're talking about changing these.
So I think
There's a sense of like I'm being
so does the first scenario, do you check your phone immediately as well?
always.
So that's what you need to change.
Right, I know that's what I'm saying. So like the reward is sort of negative and positive. The positive feeling is like, oh, I'm being responsive.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time I'm also losing time.
Would reward in this case kind of be like an outcome or something?
Yes.
You say?
It's the feeling.
Feeling, okay.
So it could be a negative feeling.
Yeah.
Of like
Okay, so in terms of notifications,
yeah,
it's very much like gambling.
right.
So like you can compare it literally to a slot machine, right? Like if you pull it, and then you're like, oh, what is it gonna be? And then you know the reward can either be very good or very bad. And with
Right.
notifications, like, oh, is it work or is it this? Like it gives you the satisfaction of finding out what it is.
Right.
That's the reward, like, and that's what happens first, like on a subconscious kind of nervous system level.
Right.
That's the reward that you get, and then right after you like get this good feeling, and oh, I found out what it is, and then oh shit, time.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it's both. It's
Yeah,
both.
it's
Right.
both.
It's the curiosity or the feeling like,
Yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I'm being responsive. This person wants
Yeah.
my time. I responded right away, so I'm a good person. But now I'm losing my time. Yeah.
In the context of the reward will be very, very strong, very like subconsciously. It's like it's hard to figure out sometimes. Even like, I know I'm wasting my time. I know I'm like doing all this. This is bad for me. Why am I still doing
But I
it?
still do it. Yeah.
So that's why you gotta dig a little bit into.
Would routine be like what you're doing currently?
Could be eating, could be going to the beach, could be doing meditation, could be exercise, any action basically.
Okay.
Something that you're doing. And that's I love what you said, Andra, as well about the gambling. It's a really good because there's like a lot of uncertainty there, and that can give a lot of craving.
There's the excitement, like he said, when you like as a soccer player, I mean, while you're waiting for the wheels to spin, it's like, am I gonna win? Am I gonna win? And that's that excitement, right?
Yeah.
What if I lose? But you're not thinking about what if I lose until the wheels stop.
And what's super challenging inside of urges and impulses when we white knuckle something, so when we're super tight about not going into it, and we resist for a long time, and we keep resisting, and we're almost at the brink of just giving back in. If you do give back in, it is a huge, it's not a good thing. If you're white knuckling and
It's kind of like you're letting the universe get to you.
yes, but in terms of what happens neurochemically, your whole system is completely scattered and messed up. A lot of different urges get released again because you're satisfying something that you've been depleted of for a long time.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you were to look at a child, right, and you look at how a child will respond, so they want their iPad, and they yell and yell and yell and yell and yell all the time, and say that the father or mother is not going to give them that, but at the last minute they give them that, then the brain is basically saying, okay, why waste all this time trying to be nice? I'm just going to yell my ass off as soon as I don't get it, and I'm going to just jump to this conclusion that I've done already. All this suffering, that's going to be the easiest way to get it.
Yeah.
It's like having an urge for McDonald's, right? Like that double cheeseburger tastes so good while you're eating it, and even maybe while you're still eating or immediately after, you've got this lump in your stomach, and you feel like shit. You feel tired. You're gross. You're just like, why did I eat that? And then you still keep doing it. It's just like, why?
I get that with high in carbohydrate foods. For example, like a bread sandwich, for example. Like a banh mi over here. They're very tasty, and some bits can be healthy within those, but after 10 minutes or so, you feel very lethargic.
I think that
And I think that's the reason a lot of in supermarkets, bakery stuff's very cheap, because I feel like it's kind of like some instant pleasure, but it fills you up.
Yeah.
It's a cheap way of doing it, but energy levels deplete.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas again, if you have a piece of fruit or
Yeah.
juice, then you're like, oh, that was pleasurable because it tasted good, and I don't feel like crap.
Yeah.
So in this case with this white knuckling, I don't think that the chemicals are strong enough to actually engage in a really tough white knuckling situation. Like where it comes to like fruits and foods, it's eating is instinct.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously a level of overindulgence or over gratifying with eating, but something as like artificial as porn, as smoking, as giving your child the iPad, these are things that have a lot more levels of dopamine and pleasure inside of simple instinct that we have for food. And so these artificial things are way more dangerous. And that's why when I'm talking about the whole situation where you're resisting, you're white knuckling, you're resisting, and then you finally give in. Even especially when you do the white knuckling, like you're in the middle of the white knuckling and then you give in. That situation is extremely challenging because whatever you're doing inside of that white knuckling, like maybe you'd be just extremely burnt out, tired, you feeling like you're could be just like super depressed. And so the easiest way then is to just feel depressed to get that indulgence again. Instead of just all these other emotions that you need to go through, it's just going to give you the extreme amount of that one. And so that's why these are, of course, for the really challenging, the ones that we don't like, right? But when we're looking at, like, there's, again, urges and impulses that are really good. Like this isn't all bad. There's like really great ones. We have to reframe it as well sometimes. We have to look at them in a different way because Julie came in here thinking that they were also really positive, and they are really positive. How do we look at our life in a very positive way? Especially when I asked you that question in the beginning, do you feel it's easy to resist? It's like we are all resisting. And in fact, we're actually really good at resisting if we were to put ourselves back in time like 20 years. 50 years. Because the technology, again, the weapons of how marketers and the way that people have shown us these things that are pleasurable, because everything inside of urges and impulses is conditioned. Where instinct is completely natural. It's what we're born and raised to do, to eat. It's not like we're automatically going to eat. Where in fact, overeating or going to porn or smoking, these things are conditioned. They're taught to us. Whoever gave you the idea that smoking was a good idea? Who gave you that idea? Definitely wasn't just a natural thing that came up like all of a sudden you get out of the womb and now you're smoking. It's not so instinct like that, right? So it's been conditioned over time. And so what I was talking about with that situation, we're getting better. And we are all really actually very good at resisting. But we have to understand the behavior that goes on between pain and pleasure. YouTube, we talked about this before in the hedonic treadmill, the balance beam with the equilibrium of how we can look at pain and pleasure. But we're actually very, very good at this already. And if you can get even better and just becoming aware of certain things, it gives you all the more tools, all the more ways to defeat the weapons, this technology in this world, the way that they can create feeling and the way that they can create emotion. And if we are not aware of what creates pleasure and pain for us, there are people who spend millions, billions of dollars doing this, that if we don't figure it out, they are going to run our life. We're going to be following what we think is pleasurable and painful because of what they have told us is pleasurable and painful. So, did you guys finish that habit loop thing? How far along are you with that?
I did one.
So one is like current, and then the switch of the current.
Okay, so I'm doing one that I'm currently going through, and so what I'm going to do is just solve that.
Yes.
Okay.
What's the swap? And the only swap you're making is with the routine.
So do you think it's wise to, I guess, do it by steps? So if you think you've got a bad behaviour, you want to do a slightly less bad behaviour and then a slightly less bad behaviour to kind of walk yourself towards healthy happiness. Because you're not going to go from having a cake to having something very healthy. You maybe go for fruit in the middle and go for a mint.
So one thing that Julie was talking about was like the 30 seconds to a minute of just like kind of like what do I do for that time?
Yeah.
Especially in the fact of when you say you want to smoke, all of a sudden you have an urge to smoke, you have an urge to go on your phone and scroll. What the best thing to do is, as soon as you feel that urge, delay it for 1 minute. Then you can go in and do it.
Yeah.
After delaying it for 1 minute one time, 5 minutes the next time.
Yeah. So my big thing is.
And 10 minutes, then 1 year. No, I'm just kidding. It'll go obviously incremental, right? 1 hour, 1 day, 1 month, 1 week, whatever it is, 3 months. It'll get longer and longer and longer until your relationship becomes completely different with this routine. And it's no longer as bad of a routine. It's no longer as bad of a craving there anymore because you've learned how to delay it. And that the delayed gratification is one of the best skills that you could ever have.
Yeah.
In fact, there is even a study that looked at children, and there was a study because of these two. It's the marshmallow challenge or something like
The
this.
chubby bunny.
No, not the chubby bunny. That's funny. I remember that challenge.
Chubby bunny.
Yeah, you put a bunch of marshmallows in your mouth and say chubby bunny.
Chubby bunny, one at a time.
But I'm talking about where basically kids were in a room and they did a study between the kids who were able to just delay this. So basically the researchers gave them a marshmallow and they said that if they wait 5 minutes or 15 minutes, I think it was, they will get 2 marshmallows. If they can wait during this time. And so what happened is over the time, you know, some kids obviously did just eat it right away. Some people waited. The people that actually waited had a lot more, like, they basically studied them all again throughout their life, and they looked at that these people turned out to be like really outgoing people and really amazing the way that they could delay their gratification.
Yeah, exactly. I saw it's been kind of online recently. I've seen some kind of video of someone just giving £5 to someone, and do you take it or should I double it for the next person? Thing. And it's like, how much are you willing to like take and just think, should I do it? Should I not? As the person got the urge to take just money from some stranger on the street, and think, how much is going to satisfy me? It's kind of like that.
And that decision of like, is £5 going to change my life?
Yeah.
Probably not. But if the next person he gives £10 to, well, that next person, that £10 actually might really change their life, so I can forego the 5 for me.
Or it's like, is it just kind of like, why is this happening and whatnot? It's like, not every day someone goes up to you on the street and says, here's a £5,
Right.
take it right now.
Right.
And it's good. They kind of just have sort of thoughts going on in their head, saying like something's up here. It's like,
Right.
is this true or not? You just kind of get these thoughts and think. It's kind of just like you haven't got much time to analyse really what's actually happened. It's kind of just in the moment, and it's kind of like an impulse really. If someone sees money and they just grab it, it's what next?
Yeah. And then that challenge is usually like if the person says, oh, I don't really need the 5, or give 10 to the next person. And then because you delayed it, now that person says, oh, well, you were really nice and they got the 10, I'm going to give you 100 now. You're like, what? Like you got this reward that you weren't expecting because you delayed that gratification for you. And I've seen those kind of videos where they kind of do that. You know, when the person says, oh, no, it's okay, I don't really need that. And then the guy goes, well, because you let the other person have this thing, I'm going to give you
100 for example.
Right. And then
Yeah, and so someone that works hard or something, for example, like, I think I saw something about, he's from the UK actually, he just gives people just a lot of money just for no reason, but he went to get a haircut in, or a shave, a street shave in India for less than £1, and it says, no, have £100 because he works so hard and everything. It's something you just don't expect it.
So with this talk about delaying gratification and immediate rewards, what is a switch? Like maybe you can reflect on this for a moment. What is the switch that you need to make in your head to go from having immediate rewards to having long-term rewards? What is the switch in your head that you need to make to change that? Does that question make sense?
Repeat that for me.
So what is the switch? What is the change that you need to make in your thought processes, your perspective, that you would need to do to change from having the immediate rewards to the long-term rewards? So for example, I changed my thought processes inside of my life when it comes to going out at night. I no longer go out even past, like, I don't like to go out and drink or be out late. And this is for the main fact of what is going to happen to me tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And so I look forward to not just what the immediate pleasures that I'm going to have right now, but I'm looking at the long-term health that I'm going to receive, and also the compounding momentum that I'm creating for myself to keep that strength, to keep that health maintained the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. So the switch that I made was just understanding that my health will compound if I don't go out at night, and I will be stronger, I'll be more cognitively able, and I'll be much more focused in my life.
That can also be pain-based, isn't it?
A pain, yeah.
I know, I feel terrible.
If you don't have that, right? Yeah, especially if you're in a high-pressure situation, like you're an A-class student or something, and you need to make sure that you go out and get that stuff done. And if you don't, then all the pain from your parents and the guilt and the ridicule that you could possibly get.
It's kind of like, it actually relates to it's kind of like impulses or urges. It's like, ask questions like, what if? Like, what if I didn't go out and drink? What if I didn't go out and drink?
There's a huge
alcohol
shift.
and stuff? There's a huge shift.
That's the perspective that
Yeah.
you can look at. The what if is one big factor
Yeah.
for switching from immediate to long term. That's a really good one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, a lot of times, it's not always just the impact it has on me, but other people. Like if I do or don't do X, something will or won't happen with other people.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a situation last night where acting on not an impulse so much, but like a desire would have had a really bad ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, nope. Big old giant nope.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know what happened. I know what would happen. And it's bad all the way around. It's just like, just don't do it.
Mm.
Because in the moment, would have been really good, but not worth the ripple effect. Because I've been in that situation and I know what happens and it's ugly.
It's kind of like planning as well. One analogy I like to like kind of refer back to is you like looking at the chessboard. It's like you're looking at the chessboard, you're playing the game, it's like, right, if I make this move, what would this lead to? What will my opponent do next? And you're like planning out situations. Like planning out, should you say, certain stages. And it's like, and then when you, for example, when you make a mistake, it's like, right, I'll go back to this point, what could I have done better? How do I solve this the next time I do it? And you can look at it from this, for example, like, for example, if you look at, I don't know, scrolling, for example, scrolling on social media, you think that's kind of the equivalent of, if you're scrolling on social media needlessly for 2 hours straight, that's like the equivalent of losing your queen on the chessboard, for example.
Mm. It can be for sure, especially if you're not understanding, like this is the awareness, right, that we have to be mindful of. And I find it actually super interesting that this is like the human experience, to be able to resist and to have this battle, where if we look at animals, they don't have this opportunity to be able to, they don't have urges and impulses. They except like cats, but except it's not necessarily an impulse, it's an instinct.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
Well, I think of animals, but they definitely learn. I mean, there's like, if I do this thing, something bad's going to happen.
Right. This is
that conditioning thing.
yes.
Right?
This is that. Yeah, that's conditioning, but they don't necessarily.
It's not cognitive.
Yeah, they don't have like this precept condition where it's like, okay, I have an ability to I can resist this. Like if they have a bowl in front of them, they're not going to resist that food.
Unless something bad has happened to them if they eat the food, right?
They
I'm
would just
talking conditioning.
they would
right?
just be confused, but that's like a factor of trusting it, but that isn't necessarily resisting, because maybe it just has to do with the environments that they're in, of like who is giving them that bowl. But animals, like we have, like it's so amazing that we have this opportunity as humans to be able to resist and to give in to what we want.
We have free will.
We do have free will. And I think that it's a blessing to be able to have these types of things, because it makes life just so much more thrilling. And it's fun to engage in impulses and urges. That's like the factor of life where you get to all of a sudden do something dumb and stupid and risky. And then that is like a really beautiful thing, because then you get to learn, you get to have some cool experiences in your life, you get to make some really cool memories and stories. Especially if you've overcome like bad things. But of course it can get to an extreme point as well, where we don't want to just be absolutely crazy all the time. Obviously it comes with a balance. So how do we balance our life then? That's a question that a lot of people come and talk to about. It's one of the biggest questions of life. How do you balance your work? How do you balance your life? You know, that sort of thing. But this is also, it's more or less with how do you balance your urges and your impulses, and then just strictly going to what is regular. I think for also when you brought up the fact of eating at the end, you know, if like having at the end of the week, you have something to give into, you have a reward that you can give yourself with. Like these types of things is a great way to use urges and impulses to your advantage. But I think when we're also looking at why we do act out on these urges and impulses, again, it comes with that feeling of resolution, that feeling of being complete. So one thing that we should try to figure out is like, how can we delay that completion? Or how can we change the completion into giving us a different reward? Or sorry, the same reward, but a different routine. So there was oh yeah, I want to actually dive into this because this is actually really amazing to look at as well when we're talking about this type of awareness. Because when we're looking at the deeper, I was brought this up right a little bit earlier about the nature, the deeper meanings behind our urges and impulses. It's important to know what those deeper urges are. So what I would like to kind of go through and ask you is, what are your urges deeper drivers for? What are they for? Like, how do these sensations inform you about the nature of your impulses? What's the nature of your urges? So again, with that example of social media, it's like, okay, I check social media for the feeling of being connected. So if you were to go out to drink, what is that deeper driver for?
So drinking, so I've thought about that a lot actually. So drinking's a difficult one for me because it's both solitude and it's socialness, kind of one behaviour depending on the circumstance that fulfills.
You get solitude and
different times.
Okay.
And sometimes I do it for solitude, sometimes I do it for socialness.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of working out which behaviour.
So whichever one that you want to feel more, it's at that time.
Well, it's whatever I need. Like those are the two needs.
Yeah.
Like go
That's
at the
the
bar
source.
and like
Yeah.
sit and have a beer by yourself.
Yeah.
Your, like alone time.
Yeah, correct.
Mhm.
Sounds good.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's kind of, so socialness I need to be social. If it's solitude I need to go do something.
Mm.
So that's like amazing. Is that the one that you wrote down for that first one?
Yeah.
So that's great. So that's what I would like you to do is for that first, inside of this habit loop, look at that first one that before changing it, what was that deeper driver for? Like what is that routine that you see there? What's the actual deeper meaning behind that? What's the actual reason for why it's happening? It could also, like a lot of times it could just be, I'm not okay with boredom. I want to feel like I'm alive. Again, these come down. So what the two factors to pay attention to inside of understanding the deeper nature is, what is the pain or pleasure? So you're either looking at it for whatever this routine is, you're either doing it to remove pain or to gain pleasure. So pain could be boredom, anxiety, or stress as examples. This one could be connection, comfort, validation,
Calm
yeah,
is the opposite of stress, right?
calm or comfort. I would say that's pretty much the same. There's the ability of saying comfort of like you're comforted by others, but that's also similar to connection. So stimulation, opposite of boredom, right? Or excitement. So these are like the types, right? These are just examples of like what the deeper meanings could be.
I think a lot of times it's like a combination of both.
Yeah.
Like you're at the same time you're going away from pain and getting pleasure.
Yes. Yes. You're getting pushed by the pain, and then you're getting pulled by the pleasure, and that's what makes it so challenging.
This doesn't feel good, but if I just, it's gonna feel so good.
Especially like for smokers, right? Because I was big into weed. My my pleasure with weed was I was getting social appreciation and validation from that. But the pain was to remove like anxiety and boredom. And so there was I was addicted to it for every single day for years, multiple times a day. Multiple times a day I would do it. I'd bring out my bong right away in the morning, about like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then another one at 6 o'clock, and then another one at 8 o'clock, and then right before I go to bed, like so many times. I think I spent like nearly $100 a week on weed.
That's US dollars.
Yeah. Yes, US dollars.
So how did you interrupt the habit cycle?
Yeah, that was very challenging for me because I had to figure out, like inside of this, once I learned this, I was like, okay, what can I look at for my cue? What is the cue? The big one was boredom for me. And so then looking at that, okay, my boredom, if I'm bored and I'm going to smoke, what is a different thing that I could do? Simply, boredom is actually one of the easiest things to change because there's so many other things that you could do.
Yeah.
So I started to go to the gym, but then that didn't work enough for me because the gym was only a certain amount of time in the day. And then after the gym, I would smoke. And so that became even more challenging. Okay, what do I do now? And then so became watching TV and smoking. So at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna watch TV. I started watching Naruto and whatever the other anime and like TV shows that I could find. But then I was like, oh, this isn't stimulating enough. All right, that's what my brain thought. And so I've then dove into doing smoking.
No.
No, not yet.
Smoking, but not weed.
Smoking weed
Or smoking
and
weed.
watching TV at the same time. Yeah. And so eventually once I completely shifted all of my, like I found like business. So I found business as like the thing that took up most of my time. And I found that that was the thing that gave me more of a purpose to use for my time. And because of that, I was able to dive more into doing business side of things. Like I would say business in a way saved my life because otherwise I'd be super addicted to smoking weed. If I didn't find something as intimate and as a big purposeful thing that I could do, because weed kept me in a situation of not having any purpose, not having any passion. And when I found that, I also was doing a challenge in this time. It's called the 75 Hard. If you've ever heard of this, it was like 2 workouts a day, drinking 4 liters of water, doing 10 pages of reading within the day, taking a progress picture, and then following a diet. So I found cooking, I found working out all the time. I started to read a lot more, and I was diving into doing business. So my entire life started to change. And then as soon as that challenge finished, I started smoking again.
So you were so busy you didn't have time to smoke weed. Basically.
Exactly.
It wasn't even that the desire was gone, there was just no time.
Yes.
That's pretty extreme.
That's super
It's very
interesting.
extreme.
Yeah.
It's very extreme. It was one of the like most difficult things that I've done. And after, like, I was like dumbfounded. Like, why am I smoking again? After, literally, it was like the next day or 2 days after. And on my 21st birthday, when I was doing this, I could have drank. I was doing this challenge during my 21st birthday, and I didn't even drink. And people were looking at me like, what the heck? What are you doing? Like, why aren't you drinking? And that was like a huge ego boost for me. But then as soon as I finished it, I started smoking again. And
So you
so
killed yourself on this, what was it, a month challenge?
it was 75 days in a row.
75 days, like
Yeah.
that's a long time.
Yeah.
And then as soon as it was done, you went back to smoking.
Yeah.
Were you like, how stupid am I?
Yeah.
So how did you stop smoking altogether?
Yeah, I started to, the biggest thing for me was looking at the identity of who I am and what smoking is.
Mm.
And so that identity for me was like, okay, am I going to be a smoker for the rest of my life? Am I going to be a person, like I found all the negative things about smoking, and especially like I switched my perception from when I smell weed to being like a really good thing. I started to resent it. I switched my ability in my head to be able to perceive what weed smells like and what it's a good thing or a bad thing.
How did you change that perception about whether you find the smell of weed? Because the smell is a sense that's very closely connected to emotions and memory.
Yeah.
That's a very big thing. How did you manage to switch that?
Yeah, because but I feel like also smell is one that you can manipulate as well, because it's very strong, but if you can literally create a different image in your head that it is resembled into, it can start to look at something completely different. Because so I was imagining like weed as like a really interesting flower that I've never smelled before, and it had this really unique smell to it. But then smelling it before smoking it is a good thing, but smelling it after it's been smoked is a huge disgust.
Oh.
So once it's in the middle, like once it's got like it's been ignited with flame and fire, it becomes a really disgusting smell. And especially if you were to look at the insides of a bong,
It's gross.
it's extremely gross. So I started to look at all these different perceptions and started to create an identity of disgust.
So some of it was like, do you want to be known as like, say I'm the stoner dude, or say I'm the guy who is something else?
Yeah.
Right, because say I'm the stoner dude's not really a very positive image.
Mm-hmm.
So in my first year at university, I was 19, and I'd say I was quite a heavy drinker of alcohol. I remember there was one night where I think I had a lot of Jaeger bombs, and I threw up at the end of it. I was like, no more, I'm done. And I've never had a Jaeger since.
Yeah.
Jaeger bombs will do it. That's a good cure for you.
Yeah.
You want to really cure yourself.
Yeah,
Jaeger
just
bombs
have
are a
just-
good choice.
Yeah, have not Jaeger bombs. Kinda
Yeah.
cured.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like now for me as well, whenever I smell vodka, I just get that just some weird thing comes in within me. It's just like it's just so much disgust that comes on. And it's like, so I can't even manage it. And it's like, I almost want to puke just from the smell of it.
The word isn't very nice.
Yeah.
Doesn't help.
So you definitely
Felix,
can.
did you shift your focus to the negative aspects
Mm-hmm.
of it, and almost like, and then you remember it, and almost like you begin to attach a different identity to the negative aspects of that bad habit in order to shift it.
Mm-hmm.
What about the social aspect of it? I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like you were surrounded by friends
Lots.
who, were encouraging of the bad habits. How did you shift that?
Yeah, because I also lived in a house that had a smoker. Like, so my roommate was a big stoner.
Oh, that's really hard.
And so that was, it was challenging as well. And I started to it was an ego thing where I started to have to look at myself as, what path do I want to go down? And I started to look at his habits of what his life is like. And it just like, it gave me a little bit of an ego boost to know that if I wasn't doing this, I wouldn't be the same as him. And that gave me some sort of motivation to be different. So I was more interested in trying to be different than be similar and kind of get that validation, because I've also known him for a long time. And so it's not like I needed to win his approval anymore. So after not needing to win that approval anymore, it gave me that recognition to be able to be on my own, to do something that's completely different for myself. And I got that identity start to be just downloaded into me of like, what is it that I truly would feel better with? But that was also during that entire challenge, I also had experiences I was in university when I was doing this. So all the time when I went out, people were inviting me out all the time. and going out, and I was there with people while they were drinking, while they were smoking, while they were doing all this. But majority of the time, when I wasn't, I was sitting at home. And I realized that nobody else was doing this. And if I'm doing this alone, and I have to indulge in smoking and drinking to be happy like everyone else is doing, I feel like that's wrong. It just like, through that experience, something clicked inside of me that was saying like, this is wrong to do this with other people, and for this sole reason of gaining pleasure.
How did that impact your friendships? Because I know like when people get sober, whatever it is, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whatever, you very often lose your friends because they don't respect the fact that you're not drinking anymore.
That's
Yeah.
your clan.
Or you're not,
That's really hard.
Yeah.
or you're not smoking. Like weed's really social, right? You share it. Like drinking is individual and you're doing it together, but it's your drink.
And the bond.
Pot, we very often we share it. You don't smoke a whole, you don't bogart the joint, right? You pass it around.
Yeah.
So it's super social.
Yeah.
And if you say no, everybody's like, come on, you used to smoke all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you lose your friends? So,
Some of them, yeah,
okay.
but also some of them are like, they're really inspired and they're really happy for
Good.
the change.
Okay, I was
that-
curious.
yeah.
I was curious, having been around a lot of addicts.
And
in
I
my
mean,
life.
like, for me, it's kind of challenging too, because I don't view them the same way as I once did.
Of course not.
And so that's also the difficult thing. It's like, okay, I could be friends with them, but we only have a certain level of where we can connect on.
Absolutely.
Because there's only to some extent of like, okay, they want to go drink or do something, and I'm just like not into that.
Yeah.
So
You're spending your time doing something else.
yeah,
Yeah, I was just curious because that's pretty common. And
Yeah.
everybody's shaking their heads like,
and it's like the impulse of even wanting to be engaged with all those people. It's like that's like the biggest craving in the world. But it's like the switch of the identity and looking at, like you were referring to, is like the negative side of the habit, the negative side of the indulgence. It's becomes a super big a switch in the head to then all of a sudden create a completely different version of yourself that is not using this or doing that. But there is a lot of different ways whenever, like, bad things I think are really, like these addictions, they can be really overdone and they can be really overindulged. And dopamine is just like the biggest factor for why they keep showing up. And if you don't start to question why you do the thing and what is the purpose that you're doing this for, what is the benefit out of this in the first place, then it just becomes automatic.
well, and that back to losing friends, right? It becomes that pleasure pain thing of like, it's painful to lose my friends, but also they're not respecting me. Like if somebody keeps going, why aren't you drinking? And they keep poking you. You're like, you know what? I just don't even want to be around you anymore. I'm going to be with people who are drinking and say, hey, King, do you want a drink? You say, no, I'm not. And I'm like, okay, cool. You want some juice? And you say, yeah, thanks, Julie. And it's just done, right?
Mhm.
And I think any of us who've quit doing something have had that shift. And it sucks at the beginning because you're like, oh man, I really like hanging out with Bob, but Bob always wants to get high, and I don't want to get high anymore.
Yeah.
Did you have to find a new clan?
Yeah, but I didn't find it until I came here. So it was years later, and I was riding solo for a long, long time and feeling very isolated and lost and solitary and not finding anyone that I could connect with. And I spent years doing things alone. And it was not easy at all, because no one around me was like, this is the first place where I've found like similar guys. Like these guys are young, and we're all on like this path to wanting to become better and to develop ourselves. But there wasn't that when I was first starting to quit all these things. And I think that's also, it was important to be in that time where I was alone, to really start to identify like, who is it that I want to be, without the pressure and the approval to win over some others. So that was definitely a factor where it needed to happen.
That's a very lonely journey. How did you find strength
Yeah.
to even do that?
Yeah. I think business was the thing that I just kind of dove
It's
into.
the rope that you
Yeah.
hung on to.
And even though I tried to do business and I just like didn't succeed at it when I first started it, I was trying to find anything else that would give me some sort of excitement and fulfillment and purpose. And that was just me being all outgoing and nice to people and just like a social person. And when I was serving in a restaurant, I got that craving fulfilled because I was a server. And so I was able to talk to people and give them some service and please them the way that restaurant was expecting me to and make them happy. I was making them very happy and they would leave the restaurant saying like, this was amazing, give me good tips. I was like happy.
It was being of service to others and cherishing others' happiness. That
Contribution.
Contribution to
Plus, it
society.
gave you the strokes. Somebody's like appreciating you, even though you weren't a service thing.
Yeah.
You were still getting the social strokes, I'm guessing.
Right.
To a certain degree, obviously, not like
Yeah,
friends.
it's hard because I didn't have anyone close to me. And so that's what made those indulgences even want to prolong. And that's why even during that entire time, like I still smoked. I didn't stop smoking until maybe 1 year ago. And this has been very difficult to not have the right people around. It's because when you're lonely and you're in your own isolation, it's so easy to fall into an impulse and an urge.
Because there's no one checking up on you.
There's no one checking
That's
on
the
you.
thing. You could give in and no one would ever know.
Yeah, and I mean it's also like that social interaction that gives so much pleasure that you want to basically, again, like there's a feeling there, right? Those feelings, they want to be completed, right? And so for them to be completed, a lot of the times it could just be going out and meeting someone and hanging out with someone and talking about that, because that itself is very relieving. And if you don't have that ability to just talk to someone like that, then it's so much easier to just indulge on something that gives you an immediate gratification, something that doesn't have any sort of resistance to it, and it's something that is at the touch of your fingers.
That joint's always there.
I
You don't
mean,
have to call it up, it's not gonna say no,
Yeah.
it's just there.
And plus, the pleasure of going and, like, say I didn't have any, right? The pleasure of receiving that and getting the dopamine and the rewards is much greater than the pain of going to get it. And that could have been a resistance for me, but the pleasure was more powerful than that pain, so that's why it was easier. But say if that the pleasure of someone coming in and talking to me and being there for me, if that would have been there, also if it would have been higher than the pleasure of the reward that I would get from smoking, and also someone that doesn't do the activity that I'm doing, then it would be not even a thing. Or if I had an attribute association with how much pain, which I didn't recognize at the time of my life, the pain that I could get in the long term.
And of course, doing drugs, it's all ritual too, right? Rolling a joint, there's a ritual. Doing cocaine, there's chopping up the lines. Heroin, it's all ritual. Like, we love the ritual along with the actual chemical addiction.
Yeah.
Right? So those habits are even drinking, right? There's a ritual. You go to the pub, you got your stool, you smoke your cigarette, whatever. They're doubly hard because you get both. You get the ritual and the actual physical, right?
It's like cigarettes. I always prefer the rolls. I never like the pre-roll because you don't get the ritual. So I want to roll my own cigarette.
And even yeah, exactly. Look at right. He's like, the thought of like rolling the cigarettes. Like, this is so cool. Right? And even maybe eating, there's a ritual sometimes.
Yeah, there's the fork and knife and the spoon.
Or cookie. Even if you're eating something healthy, like I don't know, it's weird. Or gambling or whatever you're.
Yeah, these, it's the biggest thing is just to, especially like if I were to give myself advice in that time, is just to not react immediately.
Looking in retrospect, would you have gone as extreme? because it sounds like there was 2 or 3 quite extreme actions you took, like the 75 days, and then to move here, both pretty extreme actions. Would you have done that again?
Yeah, for sure.
Like rather than something gradual?
Yeah, I think that going, because I gave myself, well, actually, technically, I kind of had the experience of white knuckling.
Okay.
And so, with that whole experience of resisting for the 75 days, it was very challenging to also not smoke, but also I was very motivated. But at the end, it's like I just gave into it right away. But that, what's it called? The cold turkey. Going cold turkey can actually be very beneficial at times, but it's also can be very. It depends on the context, especially of how much use you've already had, and how that's why slowly delaying the amount of usage or delaying the amount of time that you use to indulge can give you the upper hand in this scenario. Decreasing it from, okay, I'm not going to do this for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. Okay, I'm going to do 1 gram, 1 bowl, 1 smoke, 1 joint, and that's it. And that's also what I did. Slowly over time, I started to do less and less and less. And that gives you the switch as well to give you an easier way to jump out of that.
It doesn't seem so overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any smokers here? Like cigarette smokers?
Never smoked a cigarette in my life.
I smoke
No.
sometimes.
Yeah, because I used to smoke a lot for a long time as well, and I fully agree. Cold turkey is definitely an option, but I ended up stopping with the book. Have you guys heard of the book, The Easy Way to Stop Smoking book?
Oh no.
That's really good.
It's a really good book, and I spent a lot of time after that. It worked for me. Spent a lot of time thinking about why it worked for me, and I think I've been using that same approach when it comes to other things. And what I think the book does really well, because he says you should smoke while reading it. So I'm sitting in the
Really?
bar, I'm smoking, chain smoking my cigarettes, I'm drinking while reading the book. Because when you're smoking, as a smoker, as a heavy smoker, you're the most relaxed. That's when you're the most relaxed. So abstaining from smoking while reading the book is not going to help you concentrate on the book.
Because you're going to be all twitchy and nervous because you're
Exactly.
chosen for the cigarette.
Exactly.
Because there's 30 or 40 different volumes. Like there's alcohol, there's gambling, there's overeating, there's everything. Like I found the alcohol one.
Yeah. So what I noticed is that what he's doing by getting me to focus, because when you're reading, he's making you the most present you can be, and it's related to your comments about understanding the deeper reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now what we're doing, we're looking at an experience and we say, I remember this moment when I had a cake. You're looking at that whole experience from outside. And that's and then you'll come up with a story in your head that you think explains what happened there. And you assume that the story is the truth, but more often than not, it isn't. It's a story that allows you to not actually face what was happening there. The only way to face what was happening there is in that moment while you're doing that thing, to quietly observe. And if you truly do that again and again, sooner or later you'll face the truth about yourself that you either deny or accept. And when you accept it, typically from that moment on, you start solving that problem. And I think the problem very often is we don't do that observation while we're doing it. Instead, we stand outside and like, oh yeah, I smoke because of social reasons, or I smoke because of this other reason. And so you come up with a story in your head that actually sits between what was actually the reason you're smoking and yourself. And I think that the goal with urges and these type of things is to bridge that gap between the actual reason. And the only way to do that is just to get better at the skill of observing yourself. And that's what he does with the cigarette smoking. He's like, okay, take a puff. What does it taste like? What temperature are you feeling? He actually forces you to think about the process, and then you realize smoking sucks. If you do that often enough while smoking, you're realizing, okay, wait, I'm smoking to feel like everyone else who doesn't smoke. So it's not like I'm getting a high. It's typically smoking makes me go down and then come back to normal when I smoke. So it's not even the high, that's the first thing. The process of smoking itself. It's the smell, the taste, my fingers. And so he takes you through all the sensations you're supposed to have. And if you do that process, and you're reading this book, so you're doing it again and again and again, and he's explaining all this stuff, and you come back and you do it again, smoke another one, take a deeper toke. At the end, he's like, this is your last cigarette, and it was. Right?
Whoa.
So I'm not saying, I'm saying like, I stopped, did not smoke again. And yeah, I'm not saying it's the same for everyone. I don't want to simplify the process, but I think the most important thing is whatever it is your urges, even if it's scrolling, drinking, the question is if you really want to stop this, observe yourself doing this and ask yourself, like you say, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Am I happy right now? Is this what happy feels like? Is this how I want to feel all the time? And I think over time of doing that process, you probably will accept yourself and then change yourself.
It's almost like mindfully meditating.
It is
on the
absolutely
act of smoking.
meditating. It is
And
absolutely.
then realizing, like, you know, you mindfully meditate on chocolate, eating chocolate, and then you realize, oh my God, it's so wonderful. But if you single-mindedly focus on smoking, it kind of amplifies all the feelings that you get from it, and then smokers realize the experience is actually not pleasurable at all. Fascinating.
Like you said, like about your fingers, like ew, like while I'm smoking, it feels really good, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, my fingers stink. My teeth are yellow. It pushes non-smokers away from me. You know, that really hot girl I want to date says smoking is a deal breaker. Like for me, smoking is that's a deal breaker. You can have all kinds of other awful habits, but smoking, that's a deal breaker. And porn addiction, I discovered that one. I didn't really know that until I was with somebody who had a really bad porn addiction. I'm like, no, put your phone away.
Well, guys, this is perfect. It's 12:30 just now. Thank you so much for having this amazing discussion. I think this is a very important conversation to have, and share what you've learned with people. And it's hard because a lot of people, like we obviously have this understanding now of these, and it's like there's a lot of people who do smoke, and it's very obvious here. It's like the idea is to not be judging these people, not to tell them what to do, but just to maybe, like OJ was saying, to help them become aware of it. Maybe ask them a question of like, hey, what does that taste like right now? Maybe that's a cool question, right?
If you say that to somebody while they're smoking, they're probably going to look at you like, what are you smoking? It's a weird question to ask.
But there's gently suggesting alternatives as well. If someone says, hey, should we go to the pub? So, do you want to go for a walk?